Why do you think I'm beautiful, human? He loved the alien woman everyone feared. Elias didn't have a good answer, not one that fit the formal echoing spaces of the archive towers where she held court. His disgrace had led him here, a court-martialed wreck assigned to the backwater diplomatic corps before being marooned when his transport failed over this forgotten desert world. He hadn't expected to be found by creatures who moved with the silent grace of flowing shadow and light, their forms shifting subtly, with emotion but whose faces were studies in stillness, their true feelings conveyed through rhythmic pulses and soft internal luminescence, only visible when they allowed it. Kalen was the overseer of the archivists, a title that sounded dusty but carried the weight of ritual law. She was universally feared, he gathered, not for cruelty, but for an impenetrable reserve, a tactical mind that saw through any deception, and eyes that seemed to absorb all light, leaving only a calculating void. She sat on a simple, elevated platform carved from the same dark, smooth stone as the walls, the air cool and dry despite the arid heat of the surface far above. Guards, built like living statues and radiating faint, steady warmth, flanked her. Elias stood before her, feeling every inch the intruder, the disgraced soldier in ill-fitting civilian clothes salvaged from the transport wreckage. His translator implant buzzed faintly, converting her modulated clicks and hums into precise formal galactic standard, tinged with the ritualistic phrasing of her people. The Vithar, you are an unscheduled variable, Kalen said, her voice low, resonant, like stones grinding in deep time. Her internal light remained a steady, cool blue, the Vathar sign for neutrality or deep focus. Your presence violates protocol at multiple vectors. Elias shifted his weight. Look, I apologize for dropping in. Literally. Ship malfunction. Not exactly planned. A flicker, almost imperceptible, of gold light pulsed beneath Kalen's skin near her temple. Interest. Ship malfunction. A common deception among rogue elements, she stated, her voice flat. Your identification codes, irregular, marked with indicators of severe disciplinary action. Your designation, disgraced soldier, is noted. He felt a prickle of heat rise up his neck. Leave it to advanced aliens to have access to the interspecies military blacklists. Yeah, well, that's a long story, and frankly, not one I'm eager to get into, with someone who looks like they're about to freeze-dry me for evidence. Her internal light remained steady blue. The guards didn't react. The silence stretched, broken only by the faint, rhythmic hum of the archive towers themselves. A sound Elias was beginning to realize was more than just machinery. It was the thrum of history, of consciousness, stored in crystalline matrices. Your wit is noted. Also an unscheduled variable in encounters of this type. She paused, her gaze unwavering. The question of your disposition is not simple. You cannot be released to the surface. The arid sands are a trial even for the prepared. You cannot be integrated into our surface settlements without significant ritual adaptation, which is not permissible for an unknown. You cannot remain here indefinitely. Elias sighed. So, rock in a hard place? What are my options? Do you have a holding cell? A comfy couch? Another faint gold flicker. There are no comfy couches. There is only evaluation. The archive towers are not a place of comfort. They are a place of knowledge, of history, of bond. The word bond seemed to resonate in the very stone around them. Your fate must be determined by the protocols for unscheduled contact. This requires time and proximity. He rubbed the back of his neck. Proximity? Like I'm stuck here with you. Kalen inclined her head slightly. The cool blue light deepened momentarily. Until a resolution is calibrated, your presence here, in the heart of the archives, necessitates, calls, observation, direct observation. This was going just swimmingly. Disgraced and now under alien house arrest in what looked like the world's most ancient, least comfortable library. He was assigned a small Spartan chamber deep within the archive towers. The walls seemed to absorb sound, and the air was always the same cool, dry temperature. Kalen herself delivered him, her presence filling the narrow corridor. She moved with a quiet power, her limbs long and fluid, her form a complex geometry of angles and curves beneath dark, simple garments. He still couldn't pin down specifics like skin tone or hair, Her appearance was too dynamic, too defined by that internal light and the subtle movements that seemed to follow unseen currents. This chamber is calibrated for basic biological stability, she stated, her voice precise as ever. You will remain within its boundaries unless escorted. Attempts to breach the archive protocols are ill-advised. Elias glanced around the bare room. A hard sleeping mat, a small sanitation unit, and nothing else. Cozy, he muttered. Kalen's form held still. Comfort is not a primary function. Function is primary. He turned to her. Look, I get it, I'm an anomaly. A pain in the ass. But I'm not a threat. I'm a logistics officer who got cross-threaded with an idiot colonel. Not exactly a commando. The light near her temple flickered gold again. Faster this time, like a curious pulse. Your military record indicates proficiency beyond logistics. It notes disruptive efficiency. Unsanctioned problem-solving. His past, his disgrace, was an open book to her. Great. Yeah, well, sometimes the rules get in the way of getting things done. Apparently, breaking them, even to save lives, is frowned upon. Her steady blue light wavered, a faint ripple disturbing its surface, before it settled back. Internal conflict? He couldn't read it. Rules provide structure. Structure provides predictability. Unsanctioned variables disrupt predictability. She paused, her dark, deep eyes fixing on him. The archives require predictability. They hold the cumulative resonance of our lineage. They are fragile. The way she said fragile was the closest he'd heard her come to expressing vulnerability. It was a fleeting glimpse into whatever lay beneath the tactical ice. So, you're saying my bull in a china shop tendencies could break your giant library? Metaphorically, yes, and potentially, literally. The resonance matrices are sensitive to disharmonious frequencies. Your designation as disruptive is relevant. He sighed, running a hand through his short cropped hair. Okay, point taken. I'll try not to resonate negatively. What do I do? Just sit here? You will be assessed. Through observation. Through interaction. The protocols for unscheduled contact require understanding the variable. Understanding requires proximity and data acquisition. She stepped closer, and he felt a strange pressure in the air, a faint vibration. Her internal light began a slow, rhythmic pulse, shifting from cool blue to a soft, almost imperceptible green. Assessment. It felt like being scanned, not by technology, but by something older, more intrinsic. He stood still, resisting the urge to fidget, feeling the weight of her ancient culture, her personal intensity. Your physiological responses elevated. Your emotional state reads as wary but not hostile. Your internal narrative is complex, marked by regret and a deep-seated need for validation. He flinched. That was uncomfortably accurate. Hey, lay off the psychic snooping, or personal space? The green pulse stopped. The blue returned. Her form seemed to harden again. It is not snooping. It is observation. Necessary for calibration. Your concept of personal space is noted as a cultural divergence. She paused, then added, in a tone that almost bordered on reluctant collection, you will be escorted to the great repository tomorrow. The process of calibration will begin there. With that, she turned and left, her silent guards following. The door slid shut, leaving him alone in the quiet, cool darkness, feeling exposed and entirely out of his depth. The great repository was less a library and more a cathedral of pure information. Soaring columns of shimmering crystalline material rose into a vaulted ceiling lost in hazy light. Shelves didn't hold books. They were embedded with intricate lattices of light and shadow, humming faintly with stored knowledge. The air here felt different, heavier, charged with an almost palpable sense of history and consciousness. Kalen met him at the entrance, her guards flanking her, though they remained respectfully distant now. She wore a more elaborate garment today, woven with fine metallic threads that caught the ambient light, making her internal glow seem more subdued in contrast. Her expression remained neutral, but her internal light pulsed with a steady, methodical blue-green, purposeful. The great repository holds the cumulative knowledge, memories, and emotional resonance of the Vithar lineage, she explained, her voice lower here, almost reverent. It is the heart of our world, the core of our identity. Access is granted only through ritual attunement. Elias looked around, awestruck despite himself. It was unlike anything he'd ever seen. So this is where you keep all your history? The internet. But make it magic? A brief, sharper gold flicker pulsed at her temple. Amusement? He was starting to recognize the subtle cues. The internet is a chaotic network of disparate data. The archives, integrated consciousness, harmonized resonance. Our ancestors live here, in a sense. Their experiences, their wisdom, their very feelings. This was getting deep and weird. Okay, and how do you calibrate me here? Through resonance mapping. Your unique physiological and psycho-emotional signature must be read against the established harmonic frequencies of the archives. To ensure you do not disrupt the flow or introduce corruption. Corruption sounded bad. And how do you do that? Kalen gestured towards a circular petform in the center of the vast space, made of the same dark, smooth stone as her throne, but inlaid with swirling patterns of bioluminescent light. You will stand upon the resonance pedestal. I will initiate the pulse synchronization. Pulse synchronization sounds medical. It is a form of communion. It allows for the non-disruptive reading of your internal state. It requires proximity and a degree of openness. Her light remained steady blue-green, but he thought he detected a faint tremor in her form. Openness, like spilling my guts, like allowing your intrinsic resonance pattern to be perceived. The archives will do the reading. I am merely conduit, the harmonizer. She led him towards the pedestal. As they approached, the light patterns on its surface intensified, swirling faster. The low hum of the archives deepened, filling the space. Elias felt a growing tension in the air, a sense of anticipation that wasn't entirely his own. It felt like the building itself was holding its breath. "All right," he said, trying to sound casual, but his voice was a little shaky. "Just don't try to read the part about the court-martial, okay? That's a real low point." Kalen stopped beside the pedestal. Her gaze was fixed on the swirling light. The archives read truth, human, attempting to conceal, cured, disharmony. Talk is unproductive. She extended a hand towards the pedestal, her fingers long and slender. As her fingertips brushed the stone, a wave of light pulsed outward, and the platform began to glow with a soft, inviting radiance. "Step onto the pedestal, Elias." His name, spoken without a title or designation, it felt strangely intimate. He hesitated for only a moment, then stepped onto the glowing stone. A warmth rose up through the soles of his feet, spreading through his body. The light patterns on the pedestal pulsed in time with his own heartbeat. Kalen stepped onto the pedestal with him. She stood close, her form radiating that same cool light. But now there was a subtle shift, a harmonization beginning between their internal frequencies and the ambient hum of the archives. This was more than observation. This was something else. Kalen stood directly opposite him on the resonance pedestal, only a few feet separating them. The light beneath their feet intensified, rising around their ankles like cool water. The low hum of the archives deepened into a resonant thrum that vibrated in Elias's bones. Kalen raised her hands, palms facing each other but not quite touching. Her internal light began to pulse with a rapid, complex rhythm, shifting through shades of green, gold, and a deep violet he hadn't seen before. "Focus, human," she instructed, her voice quiet but firm, barely audible over the rising sound. "Allow the resonance, resist the urge to compartmentalize. The archives seek pattern, not narrative. Resist the urge to compartmentalize." His entire life had been about compartmentalizing, the trauma of battle, the sting of disgrace, the loneliness of exile. It was how he survived. "Easier said than done," he muttered. But he tried to relax, tried to let his thoughts flow instead of bottling them up. As Kalen's hands moved slightly closer, a shimmering field of light appeared between them, like heat haze shimmering in the desert sun, but cool and intensely focused. "The pulse synchronization," she explained, her voice strained with concentration. "My resonance pattern guides the archive's reading of yours. It is a delicate balance. Any disruption..." Suddenly, the ground trembled. Not the gentle hum of the archives, but a violent, jarring check that sent dust raining from the high ceiling. Alarms blared somewhere in the distance, sharp, discordant tones that were the antithesis of the archive's harmonic hum. Kaelin stumbled, her hands dropping slightly. The shimmering field between them flickered and wavered. What was that? Elias demanded, bracing himself against the tremor. Kaelin's internal light flashed red. Alert! Danger! Breach! She hissed, her voice sharp with urgency. The outer sectors, they've found a weakness. Who's they? The Vithar of the Scarred Peaks, the bloodline of Obsidian. They seek to corrupt the archives, to rewrite history, to legitimize their claim. The ground shook again, harder this time. The resonant hum of the archives became erratic, like a dying heart. The lights on the pedestal flickered violently. We must stabilize the pulse, Kaelin shouted, her gaze fixed on the wavering field between them. If the synchronization fails now, the backlash could shatter the primary matrices. Irreparable damage. But the tremors were increasing, throwing them off balance. A section of the high ceiling groaned ominously. I can't. It's too unstable. Elias yelled over the din. We need to get off this thing. No. The resonance is locked. Breaking it abruptly will cause critical feedback. Her internal light pulsed with desperation. The cool tactical blue, overwhelmed by the frantic red. There is only one way to force stability now. Full resonance lock. Synchronize on a primary vector. Synchronize on what? Heart pulse. Life force. The most basic, undeniable resonance. Before he could fully process what she meant, Kaelin grabbed his hands, her grip surprisingly strong. Her touch sent a jolt through him. Not just physical, but something that resonated deep within his chest. Their hands clasped skin against skin. The light between them flared, blindingly bright. The tremors intensified, but somehow, the pedestal felt steadier, their connection a temporary anchor against the chaos. Kaelin's eyes, usually dark and unreadable, seemed to bore into his, searching, demanding. Elias, allow the merge. The word merge hit him with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't just calibration anymore. This was something fundamental, something primal. The light between their clasped hands exploded, consuming them. Elias felt a tearing sensation, not of flesh, but of consciousness, like his mind was being ripped open and woven into hers. It wasn't just his thoughts, his memories, his fears flooding outward. It was hers rushing in, a tidal wave of ancient knowledge, strategic calculations, crushing grief, and a solitude so profound it ached. Images flashed through his mind, vast starless voids, cold stone walls, the rhythmic pulse of life in darkness, a figure standing alone against a howling wind, the weight of centuries of expectation, the sudden sharp pain of loss. He saw the scarred peaks, harsh and unforgiving, and the cold, grasping ambition of the bloodline of Obsidian, their forms radiating not light, but shadow. He understood, in a horrifying instant, their goal to infect the archive's core resonance with their own corrupt lineage, to rewrite the very foundation of Vathar identity, making their tyrannical rule seem inevitable, ancestral. Kaelin's grief washed over him, not just intellectual knowledge of it, but the raw, searing feeling of losing something irreplaceable, something that had been central to her purpose. It was tied to the archives, to a responsibility he couldn't yet name. His own disgrace, his failure, his feelings of inadequacy, spilled into the merge, raw and exposed. He felt her reaction, a flicker of surprise, then a strange, quiet understanding that resonated deeper than unspoken word. The tremors outside lessened, momentarily, as the chaotic energy was somehow absorbed or counteracted by the forced synchronization. The resonant hum of the archives stabilized, albeit at a higher, more frantic pitch. But the merging wasn't just mental, it was physical. A heat bloomed between their joined hands, spreading rapidly through their bodies. It wasn't a gentle warmth, it was an inferno. A desperate biological and energetic convergence driven by the need to survive, to harmonize the impossible dissonance, threatening to rip the archives and them apart. He felt the complex geometry of her form against his, the subtle shifts of her internal light, now visible not just to his eyes, but to his deepest senses. He felt her, not just Kalen the tactician, but Kalen the living, breathing, feeling being. The sensation was overwhelming, terrifying, and undeniably fundamentally intimate. Their joined hands tightened, a desperate anchor in the storm of merging consciousness and escalating physical intensity. He saw the raw need in her eyes, stripped bare of the usual control. Her internal light pulsed with a frantic, desperate violet and gold, the colors swirling and blending with his own purely human heat. This was the pulse resonance sync, forced by catastrophe. It wasn't a ritual, it was a fight for survival that had become something far, far more. He didn't know how long it lasted. The fusion of minds and bodies and resonant frequencies. Time seemed to distort, stretching and compressing. When the blinding light finally receded, and the intense physical and mental pressure eased, they were left standing on the pedestal, panting, their hands still clasped, the air thick with spent energy. The alarms outside were still blaring, but the violent tremors had stopped. The archive's hum, while still elevated, sounded stable. Kalen stumbled and Elias caught her, his arm going around her waist. Instinctively, her form felt solid, real against his, no longer just a composition of light and shadow. Her internal light had settled into a slow, steady beat of mixed blue and gold, exhaustion, and something else. His own mind felt raw, exposed, yet strangely clear. The walls between their consciousnesses were gone, or at least translucent. He could still feel echoes of her grief, her strategic mind working overtime even now, and the lingering imprint of his own vulnerabilities. He looked down at their joined hands, just above their clasped fingers, shimmering faintly in the air, like residual heat, was a symbol, a complex, interlocking pattern of light and shadow, vibrating with shared resonance. A bond mark, the kind the Vithar gave only once, and it was between him and the feared overseer of the archives. They didn't have long to process the magnitude of what had happened. The moment the most violent tremors ceased, Kalen straightened, pulling away from his support. Her face, which moments before had been open in the agony of the merge, snapped back into its familiar, guarded stillness. But her internal light remained a turbulent mix of blue and gold, reflecting the chaos beneath the surface. It stabilized the core resonance, she said, her voice shaky, stripped of its usual formality. Your pattern, boss. It harmonized the disruption. Elias was still reeling, his mind a tangle of her memories and his own, the physical aftershocks of the merge vibrating through him. Yeah, well, teamwork, right? He gestured to the shimmering bond mark above their hands, which pulsed faintly in response to their proximity. What is that? What did we just do? Kalen looked at the mark, her dark aches wide, reflecting the faint light. The resonance lock. It created a primary bond, she whispered, the awe in her voice a stark contrast to her usual control. It is the mark of shared resonance, a permanent link. Permanent? He felt a cold dread snake through him. As forever? In Vethar terms, yes, a resonance bond is indissoluble. It links life force, consciousness, destiny. Destiny, right. From disgraced soldier to eternally bound to a feared alien tactician, he barely knew, in the heart of a sacred library under attack. His life had taken a truly bizarre turn. The alarms continued to blare. Closer now. The Scarred Peaks bloodline, Kalen said, her tactical mind reasserting itself, pushing back the emotional shock. Her internal light began to pulse with sharp, decisive green amongst the gold and blue. They exploited the calibration process, hoped to disrupt the archives and seize control. The sync stopped the primary corruption, but the breach is still active. They are inside the outer sectors. Inside, how many? Unknown. But they are driven by ritual ambition. They will seek the core. This core. She gestured around the great repository. We must intercept them. We? He was a logistics officer, for crying out loud. His combat training was rusty, his disgrace tied to refusing a massacre order, not winning one. Kalen, I'm not exactly frontline material. I'm good with supply lines, not shootouts with glowy aliens. Her gaze was intense, her internal light now focusing into a hard, determined green. Your resonance pattern is now interwoven with the archives. With You are no longer merely human. You are a harmonized element. The sync revealed unexpected capacities within your frequency. Latent potential. Latent potential. His potential for snark, maybe. Look, I appreciate the vote of confidence, but the bond, Elias, she interrupted, her voice dropping to a low, intense level. It is not just a mark. It is a conduit, a shared frequency. In the merge, I felt glimpses of your disruptive efficiency, your ability to solve problems through unconventional means. My knowledge of the archives, of Vithar's strategy, combined with your pragmatism, your willingness to break flawed rules, we are stronger together now. She held up their joined hands, the bond mark pulsing between them. This mark is not just a symbol, it is a weapon, an interface. We can access the archive's defensive resonance patterns, but only through this bond. She looked at him, her gaze searching his face for the first time since the merge, truly seeing him, not just assessing him. The archive, they are my charge. My lineage sacrificed much to protect them. My grief, it is tied to that sacrifice. I will not let them fall, not to the obsidian bloodline. There was a raw determination in her voice that mirrored the echoes of grief he felt through their shared bond. For the first time, he saw the person beneath the tactician, the guardian carrying an unbearable weight, and through the merge he knew she had seen him too. His past, his failure, his hidden motivations. There was no hiding anymore. Their fates were tangled, their survival now linked. The fight was unlike anything Elias had ever experienced. It wasn't just physical combat, it was a battle waged on multiple frequencies. Kaylin, moving with startling speed and grace, her form a blur of light and shadow, fought with elegant, ritualistic movements, using weapons of focused light drawn from the archive's resonance. Elias, armed with a salvaged energy pistol from his transport and his rusty but effective combat instincts, provided cover, targeting the encroaching obsidian bloodline invaders. They were larger, bulkier Vithar, their forms radiating a dull, absorbing darkness instead of the inner archive Vithar's light, their movements brutal and direct. But the true power came from the bond. Through the shimmering mark between their hands, which they kept close whenever possible, Elias felt Kaylin feeding him data, tactical information, warnings of incoming attacks. More than that, he felt the archive's resonance flowing through her, amplified and directed by their shared connection. He could see faint lines of light spreading across the floor, patterns only visible to him now, indicating weak points, energy flows, or the predicted path of an enemy. Kaylin, in turn, seemed to draw on something from him, not just his physical support, but perhaps his grounding presence, his unfiltered perspective, his willingness to just act without the layered calculations of Vithar's strategy. Left flank corridor 5, 3 hostiles. Kaylin's thought pulsed directly into his mind through the bond. Clear as a spoken word, he spun, firing his pistol, the energy bolts effective against their dense forms. Got it. You take the one on the right. He's radiating high intent. His own less structured observations fed back to her. The bond was a constant, two-way stream of information, emotion, and resonant energy. It was exhausting, exhilarating, and terrifyingly efficient. They seek the central nexus. Kaylin projected, parrying a brutal strike with a shield of light. The heart of the archive. If they corrupt that, her grief flared through the bond, sharp and suffocating. They will make their lies truth. Our history, our ancestors, twisted into instruments of their ambition. The fight reached the main chamber surrounding the resonance pedestal. More obsidian warriors flooded in, their dark forms a stark contrast to the luminous heart of the archives. Kaylin and Elias fought back to back, their movements synchronized not by practice, but by the involuntary, instinctive coordination of the bond. Elias felt a wave of despair emanating from Kaylin as the sheer numbers of the enemy became apparent. Too many, she sent, her energy reserves visibly draining. We cannot hold them all. We can make them pay for every inch. Elias retorted, switching to a salvaged energy blade, its charge low but its edge still sharp. He felt a flicker of surprise and grim satisfaction from her through the bond. Disruptive efficiency, she echoed, a phantom whisper of her usual formal tone. He dodged a sweeping blow from a heavy, dark weapon. Yeah, well, necessity is the mother of invention, right? As the obsidian Vithar pressed in, Kaelin made a sudden, desperate move. She slammed her hand onto the edge of the resonance pedestal, sending a pulse of pure archive energy rippling outward. It wasn't a weapon, but a signal, a call to the deepest layers of the archive's defense. The very air around them shimmered, and faint, spectral forms began to coalesce from the light and shadow. The resonant echoes of ancient Vithar guardians, responding to the call mediated by the unique frequency of their shared bond. The obsidian invaders faltered, their dark forms recoiling from the spectral light beings. It wasn't a permanent solution, just a momentary reprieve, but it bought them precious time. "We must reach the heart of the archive," Kaelin urged, grabbing his arm. "Before they regroup, only there can we initiate the final severance protocol." They fought their way towards the central spire of the repository, the spectral guardians holding the obsidian bloodline at bay for now. The air grew colder, the light from the archives more intense. As they approached the heart, a nexus of swirling energy, contained within a lattice of ancient crystal. Kaelin's energy was clearly flagging, the intense resonance work in combat taking its toll. Elias, running on adrenaline and the strange amplification provided by the bond, felt strangely focused, his senses heightened. "The severance protocol," he gasped between breaths, dodging a stray energy blast that slipped past the spectral guardians. "What is it?" "A failsafe," Kaelin explained, leaning against a crystal column, her internal light dimming. "To prevent catastrophic corruption. It isolates the heart, locks it down. It requires luck as a complete resonance match. A pure Vithar frequency." Dread settled in Elias's stomach. "But I'm not Vithar, not pure." Kaelin looked at him, her eyes soft for a fleeting moment, reflecting the intense light of the heart. "Your frequency, after the sync, it is intertwined with mine. It is harmonized. The archives accept it. But it requires absolute alignment. Physical, mental, emotional." Her meaning was starkly clear. The severance protocol required a perfect bonded resonance. It required them as a unit to become the key, and their bond, forged in desperation on the pedestal, was the only way they could achieve that alignment. It required not just proximity, but a total conscious merging of their being, deeper even than the force sync. It required intimacy, not just physical, but a complete surrender of self to the shared frequency of their bond. The air around the heart thrummed with power, drawing them closer. The spectral guardians were beginning to fade, the obsidian bloodline pressing forward again, their dark forms a growing threat. "We're out of time," Elias said, his voice low. He looked at Kaelin, seeing the exhaustion, the fear, but also the unwavering determination in her form, in her flickering internal light. He reached out and took her face in his hands. Her skin was cool, smooth, shifting subtly beneath his touch, as her internal light pulsed. "Kaelin," he said, using her name, allowing the raw emotion from their forced merge to surface. "If this is what we have to do, let's do it. Together." Her eyes searched his, and he felt a rush of pure, unadulterated vulnerability flow through the bond. The buried grief she carried, the crushing weight of her responsibility, the fear of failing her ancestors, her lineage, and beneath it, a nascent, fragile thread of something else, something akin to hope, tied to his presence, their bond. "Elias," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rising hum of the heart and the distant sounds of combat. This is not the ritual of bond. Not as it is meant to be." "Maybe not," he said, rubbing his thumbs gently along her cheekbones. "But it's our bond. And right now, it's the only thing that can save your archives. And maybe one of us." He leaned in, and she met him halfway. Their lips met, a tentative brush at first, then dimming as the energy from the heart pulsed around them. It was a kiss fueled by desperation, survival, and the electric current of their shared bond. As their connection deepened, the shimmering bond mark above their joined hands flared with blinding light, mirroring the heart. Their internal frequencies locked, perfectly aligned, amplified by the raw emotion flowing between them. His fear, her grief, their shared resolve. The power of the archives surged through them, guided by their unified resonance. As their lips parted, The light from the bond mark between them pulsed one final time, sending a wave of energy directly into the heart of the archive. The great crystal matrix flared, a brilliant, purifying light spreading outward, pushing back the encroaching darkness of the obsidian bloodline. A resonant tone, clear and pure, echoed through the repository, a sound that felt like the very history of the Vithor singing. The spectral guardians solidified for a moment, empowered by the pulse, driving the invaders back decisively. Then, with a final, powerful thrum, the heart of the archive seemed to retract, the swirling energy focusing inward, the crystal lattice sealing itself with an audible click that reverberated through the ancient stone. Silence fell, broken only by the distant sounds of retreating footsteps and the lingering hum of the secured archive. The obsidian bloodline had been repelled, their attempt to corrupt the heart thwarted. Kaelin settled, collapsing against Elias, her energy completely spent. He held her, feeling the rapid, irregular pulse of her internal light against his chest. The raw grief he had felt through the bond was still there, but now there was also a fragile sense of relief, of purpose fulfilled, mixed with a profound exhaustion. "It is done," she whispered, her voice raspy. "The heart is secured. The severance protocol. It worked." Elias held her close, feeling the weight of her form. The reality of their bond settled deep within him. The shimmering mark above their hands was still visible, faintly pulsing with the steady rhythm of their shared life force. "Yeah," he breathed, burying his face in the side of her neck, feeling the subtle texture of her skin, the warmth radiating from her body. "We did it." He pulled back slightly, looking at her face. It was still etched with exhaustion and the residue of her grief, but the impenetrable mask was gone. Her eyes, usually dark and distant, were soft, looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite decipher. "The bond, what it remains," she said, stating the obvious, her voice regaining some of its usual formality, though still colored by vulnerability. "Indissoluble." "Duh. Looks that way." He managed a weak smile. "Guess I'm not getting off this rock anytime soon, huh?" A faint, hesitant flicker of gold light pulsed near her temple. "Understanding? Acceptance? The protocols for unscheduled contact. They are superseded now," Kaelin said, her gaze dropping to their still joined hands, the bond mark a glowing testament to their shared ordeal. "You are no longer merely a variable. You are bonded to me, to the archives, to the Vithar lineage." It was a lot to take in. From disgraced soldier to bonded guardian of an alien race's history, all in the span of a couple of days. He had stumbled into this world through accident and duty, and now he was tied to it by ritual and intimacy forced by catastrophe. "So, what happens now?" he asked. Kaelin looked back up at him, her dark eyes steady, though the vulnerability lingered beneath the surface. "The scarred peak's bloodline is repelled, but not defeated. They will not forget this. The political repercussions of our bond, they are significant. A human bonded to the overseer of the archives. It violates centuries of tradition. It will be challenged." Of course it would. Nothing could ever be simple. "And us?" he asked, his voice quieter. "What about us? This bond, this merge, what does that mean for you?" "For me?" Her internal light shifted to a deep, turbulent violet and gold, reflecting the storm of emotion within her. She finally answered the question from the title, not with words, but with the raw, undeniable truth of their shared experience. "You saw me, Elias," she said, her voice barely a whisper, thick with the weight of her revelation. "Through the merge, you saw everything. The burden, the grief, the isolation." She looked at him, and he saw it clearly now. The deep-seated sorrow that had made her so cold, so feared. "And you did not recoil. You did not judge. You harmonized." She paused, her gaze fixed on his face, searching for answers he didn't have words for. "What?" He couldn't explain it in terms she would understand, not with logic or formal language. He just knew that in the heart of the storm, when their consciousnesses merged, when he saw the depth of her pain and the fierce protectiveness she held for her people's legacy, something inside him had shifted. The protective instinct that had cost him his career, the need to defend something fragile and precious, had found a new focus. "I don't know, Kaelin," he said honestly, his voice rough with emotion. Maybe, maybe because your grief felt real, more real than anything else down here. And you were fighting for something that mattered. He reached up, gently touching the bond mark, glowing between them. And somehow, in the middle of all this chaos, I think I saw a kind of beauty in that. Her internal light pulsed, gold and blue and violet swirling together, a complex radiant storm. She didn't look away. The fight was over, but the real challenge, the one of navigating their impossible bond and the future it represented, had just begun. The immediate aftermath was a blur of activity. Vethar guards, their internal lights pulsing with alert green and yellow, secured the repository. The remaining obsidian intruders were rounded up, their forms radiating sullen, defeated darkness. Kaelin, leaning heavily on Elias for support, issued quiet, precise commands, her tactical mind still functioning despite her exhaustion. The strange synchronization of their movements, the subtle ways they anticipated each other's needs, was a silent testament to the bond now permanently woven between them. As the crisis subsided, the political reality of their situation became impossible to ignore. Senior archivists, their forms radiating concern and formal disapproval, approached Kaelin. They cast wary, often overtly suspicious glances at Elias, the human bonded to their overseer. Their internal lights were a cool, unwelcoming glare. Overseer Kaelin, stated one, his voice a resonant hum of authority. The severance is secure, the archive is protected, but the presence of the unscheduled variable and the mark of bond. This requires immediate address by the Council of Lineages. Kaelin straightened, pushing herself away from Elias. Though the connection between them remained palpable, her face resumed its stoic composure, but Elias could feel the ripple of apprehension beneath the surface through the bond. I understand, Arch-Resonator, she replied, her voice formal, regaining its usual precise cadence, though it held a new depth, a subtle undertone of defiance. The bond is permanent. It is an unforeseen consequence of the severance protocol activation, a necessary price for safeguarding the archive's integrity. A price? Another Arch-Resonator questioned, their light pulsing with skepticism. Or a violation? A human, bonded to the core lineage? This has no precedent. It conflicts with ancient law. Ancient law prioritizes the survival of the lineage in the protection of the archives. Kaelin countered, her voice gaining strength. The severance protocol was activated according to the foresight of the ancients. Its side effects, while unexpected, are intrinsically linked to its success. She looked directly at Elias, her gaze steady. The human's resonance pattern, harmonized with my own via the force sync, was the key. Without him, the archives would be corrupted. Her internal light pulsed with unwavering conviction, a hard, bright green cutting through the apprehension. It was a deliberate move, Elias realized, presenting their bond not as a romantic or personal connection, but as a functional, necessary part of saving the archives. A tactical framing of intimacy. Elias felt a wave of protectiveness towards her, a fierce, instinctive need to stand by her, born not just from the bond, but from seeing the weight she carried, the sacrifices she was willing to make. She's telling the truth, he said, stepping forward, ignoring the hostile stares and pulsing blue lights of the archivists. Your big, glowy library was about to get trashed. We stopped it. That mark? It wasn't a choice. It was survival. His blunt, simple language, free of Vithar formality, seemed to baffle the archivists. Kaelin's internal light pulsed gold. Amusement, relief, for a fleeting moment. The Arch-Resonator who had first spoken studied Elias, his light a cool, calculating blue. Your candor, discordant with the gravity of the situation. Human. Yeah, well, my candor probably saved your asses. Elias shot back, unable to resist the dry humor. Even now, the Arch-Resonator's light pulsed a sharp, irritated red. Kaelin placed a calming hand on Elias's arm, a small gesture that spoke volumes to the observant Vithar. The council will convene, Kaelin stated, turning back to the archivists, her composure fully restored. We will present the circumstances of the severance and the nature of the resulting bond. The future of the archive's guardianship and the human's place within it must be determined. Under the full light of ritual law, she didn't look at Elias, But through the bond, he felt her resolve, her determination to see this through, no matter the personal cost. Their impossible bond, born of chaos and forced intimacy, was now a political and cultural flashpoint, and they would face it together. The Council of Lineages convened in a vast, circular chamber far above the archives, closer to the surface light which filtered down through crystalline vents. The air here was warmer, drier, carrying the faint scent of desert flora. Representatives from the various Vathar bloodlines were present, their forms radiating different colors and intensities of light, reflecting their lineage and mood. The Obsidian bloodline representatives were present too, their forms radiating a sullen, dark energy, their internal lights a deep, simmering red, resentment, hostility. Kaelin stood before the council, Ilias at her side. He felt like a zoo exhibit, the object of intense, critical scrutiny. Kaelin, dressed in simple, dark robes that highlighted her presence, presented the events in the archives with meticulous detail, her voice calm, precise, devoid of overt emotion. She described the Obsidian breach, the failure of conventional defenses, the necessity of activating the severance protocol, the unforeseen consequence of the forced pulse synchronization that resulted in the bond. She framed everything in terms of ritual law, ancestral duty, and the survival of the archives. She did not dwell on the intimacy of the bond, presenting it as a functional outcome, a biological and energetic necessity imposed by the crisis. Ilias felt the strain on her through the bond, the immense effort it took to maintain her composure, to suppress the raw emotion of their experience, to intellectualize the most profound connection she'd ever formed. When she finished, the chamber was silent, save for the low, ambient hum of the building and the subtle shifts in the Vithar's internal lights. The arch-resonator who had confronted them earlier rose. "Overseer Kaelin's account is clinically accurate," he stated, his light a cool, assessing blue. "However, it omits the most significant variable, the inherent disharmony of the human presence. Ancient texts foretold of variables that could disrupt the archive's purity. The human's very being is an anomaly. His past, marked by disgrace, indicates a fundamental lack of harmonic alignment." An Obsidian representative rose, their form radiating hostility, their internal light a venomous red. "The human is a corrupting influence. His presence forced the severance. He is not a guardian. He is the contagion. The bond is an abomination, a perversion of sacred ritual." Whispers rippled through the chamber, lights flashing with disapproval and fear. Elias felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. They weren't just judging him. They were using him to attack Kaelin, to undermine her authority and the legitimacy of their bond. He felt Kaelin's hand subtly brush his, a silent signal of reassurance and shared resolve. He met her gaze, saw the unwavering strength in her eyes, the silent plea for him to trust her lead. She turned to the council, her voice steady. The human's resonance pattern, while initially discordant, harmonized by the forced sync, mediated by my own lineage frequency. She countered, her internal light a pure, unyielding green. The archive accepted it. "It is not a perversion. It is a transformation. A unique frequency capable of interacting with the archive's deepest layers. The bond proves this. It is a mark of acceptance by the archive itself." This was audacious. She was arguing that his very disharmony, once harmonized through their bond, made him more compatible, a unique key. It was a bold reinterpretation of ritual law. "Transformation?" scoffed the Obsidian representative. "More likely, corruption has already taken hold, twisting the archive's judgment. The archives do not judge in the manner of bloodline politics," Kaelin stated, her voice sharp. "They resonate with truth. The severance protocol required perfect alignment. The bond between myself and Elias provided that alignment. The truth is in the outcome. The archive is safe. The Obsidian ambition is thwarted." She paused, then added, her voice lower, resonating with the weight of ancestral authority. "To deny the validity of this bond is to deny the efficacy of the ancients' own failsafe. To deny the archive's choice." The chamber was silent again, the weight of her words hanging in the air. She had invoked the highest authority, the ancients and the archive itself. It was a risky gamble, forcing the council to choose between their rigid laws and the undeniable fact that the archives were saved, thanks to the bond they were condemning. Through their connection, Elias felt her fear, the immense pressure she was under, but also a fierce, protective love for the archives, for her people and for the fragile, improbable connection they now shared. The dry humor of the situation, a human soldier arguing by their ritual law, was almost lost in the tension, but it was there, a dark thread of irony in the high-stakes drama. The council deliberated in silence, their internal lights swirling in a complex dance of deliberation and uncertainty. Elias stood beside Kalen, acutely aware of the bond mark pulsing faintly between them, a visible manifestation of their impossible connection. He could feel the raw nerves of the obsidian bloodline through the ambient resonance of the chamber, their anger, their thwarted ambition, their simmering hatred directed equally at Kalen and him. Kalen remained outwardly calm, her form still, her internal light a steady, resolute green. But Elias felt the turmoil beneath the surface, the echoes of grief, the strategic calculations, the quiet desperation. He squeezed her hand subtly, a small gesture of solidarity in the face of overwhelming judgment. She squeezed back, a brief, tight pressure. Finally, the arch-resonator addressed the chamber again. "The council has considered the arguments," he stated, his voice grave. "The facts of the breach and the successful severance are the efficacy of the protocol and the unexpected nature of its activation are acknowledged." He paused, his gaze sweeping over Kalen and Elias. "However, the nature of the resulting bond, a resonance between a Vather overseer of core lineage and an unscheduled human variable, creates a state without precedent. It violates fundamental tenets of bloodline purity and ritual exclusivity." The obsidian representatives radiated satisfaction, their red lights flaring. Elias felt a wave of disappointment and anger wash over him. They were going to invalidate the bond, cast them out, maybe worse. But the arch-resonator wasn't finished. Yet the archive itself stands as testament to the efficacy of the bond in the critical moment. The Severus Protocol, a creation of the ancients, accepted this harmonized resonance as the key. To reject the outcome is, as Overseer Kalen states, to question the wisdom of the ancients. He sighed, a sound like dry wind over stone. Therefore, a compromise is required. A new path must be forged from this unprecedented event. He looked at Kalen, Overseer Kalen. "Your position and authority are acknowledged. Your dedication to the archives is beyond question. Your lineage is secure." He then looked at Elias, his cool gaze assessing. "Human Elias, your designation as variable is rescinded. You are now designated Resonance Harmonizer of the Archives, a title created this cycle, reflecting your unique role in the severance." Elias blinked. Resonance Harmonizer sounded like a fancy name for Kalen's human accessory. "And the bond?" Kalen asked, her voice steady, her internal light remaining a hard green. "Is it recognized?" The arch-resonator hesitated. "The bond is a reality. Its nature is complex. It is not a bond of bloodline, nor of traditional ritual marriage. It is a bond of shared resonance, sanctioned by the archive's own acceptance." He looked at both of them, the bond mark pulsing between their joined hands. Under ritual law, a bond of shared resonance necessitates proximity, collaboration, a shared purpose tied to the source of the bond. His gaze fell back on Kalen. "Overseer Kalen, your duty remains with the archives, and the resonance harmonizer is bound to the source of his designation, to you, to the archives." It wasn't an outright recognition of their bond as a marriage or traditional pairing, but it wasn't a rejection either. It was a legalistic sidestep, acknowledging the reality of the bond without breaking ancient law, while simultaneously tying Elias permanently to Kalen and her duty. He was officially her appendage, sanctioned by alien law. "So, I'm basically assigned to you?" Elias asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. Kalen's internal light pulsed gold, amusement, dry irony. "In essence, human," she replied, turning slightly to face him, a ghost of a smile touching the corner of her lips. "Your disruptive efficiency is now formally tasked with assisting my guardianship of the archives. Great, he muttered. Looks like my disgrace just got a new title and a very complicated job description. The Obsidian representatives radiated fury and frustration. They couldn't challenge the council's ruling without challenging the archive itself, but they had been denied their goal of invalidating Kalen or the bond entirely. The arch-resonator gave a final, resonant hum. The matter is settled. Overseer Kalen and the resonance harmonizer will report to the core sectors. Further protocols regarding the integration of the resonance harmonizer will be calibrated. The council began to disperse, lights fading as they moved away. Kalen turned fully to Elias, the bond mark between them glowing softly. The tactical mask was still in place, but her internal light was a mix of relief, exhaustion, and that subtle, complex swirl of violet and gold that spoke of vulnerability and something deeper. Well, she said, her voice quiet for his ears only. That was less catastrophic than it could have been. Elias looked at her, at the intricate dance of light and shadow that was her form, at the bond mark linking them, at the raw emotion she'd shown him in the merge, and the strength she'd displayed before the council. Yeah, he agreed, a genuine smile finally touching his lips. Somehow I managed to turn court-martial into cultural integration. Only me. Her internal light pulsed a bright, clear gold, a silent laugh shared between them through the bond. They had survived. They were bonded, and their story was far from over. Life in the archive towers changed subtly after the council's ruling. Elias was no longer a prisoner, but he wasn't entirely free either. He was Resonance Harmonizer, a title that granted him access to certain areas but marked him as eternally tied to Kalen. The Vithar treated him with a mixture of wary curiosity and formal distance. The Obsidian bloodline's hostility lingered, a dark shadow lurking at the edges of the tower's luminous calm. Kalen and Elias spent their days calibrating his interaction with the archives, exploring the potential of their unique bond. The bond wasn't just a communication link. It allowed Elias to perceive the archives in a way no unbonded being could. He saw the flow of information as shimmering currents, felt the weight of history as palpable pressure, and sometimes in the quiet moments felt the faint echoes of ancient Vithar emotions resonating through the stone. Their collaboration deepened, moving beyond the necessity of survival. Kalen, forced by the council's ruling to spend considerable time with him, began to let her guard down. The tactical ice melted slowly, revealing the person beneath. She spoke of her lineage, of the burden of guardianship, of the grief that had shaped her, the loss of her predecessor, her mentor, in an earlier clash with the Obsidian bloodline, a loss tied to a sacred duty she now carried alone. Elias, in turn, shared fragments of his own past. The impossible orders, the moment he chose conscience over career, the loneliness and bitterness of his disgrace. They found common ground in shared trauma, in the weight of responsibility, in the unexpected comfort of mutual understanding. Their conversations, initially formal and functional, evolved into something more intimate, punctuated by Elias's dry humor, which, to his surprise, sometimes elicited those fleeting golden pulses of amusement from Kalen. The physical intimacy born of the forced merge lingered, a silent current beneath their interactions. The bond pulsed with their proximity, a constant reminder of the night in the repository. Neither spoke of it directly at first, the memory too raw, too tied to desperation. But the underlying physical awareness grew, a shared glance, a hand brushing hers, the simple act of standing close while they worked. Each small contact sent a jolt of recognition through the bond, a silent acknowledgement of the physical and emotional lines they had crossed. One evening, in the quiet privacy of a lesser calibration chamber, working late into the cycle, the ambient hum of the archives low and soothing, Kalen paused her work. She turned to him, her internal light a soft, warm gold, a color he was beginning to associate with moments of unexpected openness. Elias, she said, her voice quiet. That night, in the repository, the merge, how it was necessary for the archives. Yeah, he said, watching her, his heart picking up speed. I know. But it was also, she searched for the word, her gaze meeting his, intimate, profound. It was not merely function. The air between them grew thick with unspoken acknowledgement. No, He agreed softly. It was. She reached out, her hand hovering just above his, the bond mark between them pulsing gently. I have experienced such communion. Not in the way of bond ritual, not forced by chaos. She looked at him, her dark eyes deep pools reflecting the chamber's soft light. Through the bond, I still feel echoes of your resilience, your strange humor, and your regard. She hesitated, her internal light swirling with vulnerability. You just saw my grief, my fear, and you did not turn away. Her voice dropped to a whisper, returning to the question she'd asked him hours, days, maybe a lifetime ago. Why do you think I'm beautiful? Human. The question hung in the air, stripped of its initial context of judgment, offered instead as a plea for understanding, a vulnerable query from someone who had shown him her deepest pain. Elias stepped closer, closing the small distance between them. He reached out and took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers, the bond mark flaring softly as their skin met. He could feel the delicate structure of her bones, the warmth radiating from her form, the steady beat of her internal light against his palm. Beautiful isn't about symmetry, or light, or form, Kaelin, he said, his voice low, rough with emotion. Not really, not the kind that matters. He looked into her dark, deep eyes, seeing the intelligence, the weariness, the unexpected softness. You asked why I thought you were beautiful. That first day when you were all tactical and cold and scary. He gave a small, wry smile. Truth is, back then, I didn't. I thought you were formidable, impenetrable, a very intimidating obstacle. He lifted their joined hands slightly, indicating the pulsing bond mark. But then, this happened, and I saw what you carry. The weight of history, the burden of duty, the depth of your grief. He squeezed her hand gently. I saw how fiercely you protect what you value, how you stand against the darkness, even when you're redder. He looked at her, at the complex dance of light within her, the subtle shifts that spoke volumes, now that he knew how to read them. That's beautiful, Kaelin. That strength, that resilience, that fierce, quiet fire inside you. He paused, taking a breath. And yeah, he added, a softer smile touching his lips. When your light does that, he gestured vaguely at her form, the gold and violet swirling now with increased intensity, reflecting his words, his feelings. When you let the mask drop, even for a second, yeah, you're breathtaking. Her internal light pulsed rapidly, gold and violet swirling into a bright, vibrant wave that washed over him through the bond. Acceptance, astonishment, a rush of something akin to joy. She didn't speak, but her grip tightened on his hand, her other hand reaching up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. Her touch sent a jolt through him, pure physical heat now mingling with the complex emotional and resonant connection of the bond. The forced intimacy of the severance protocol had opened a door, and the shared vulnerability and understanding in the aftermath had allowed them to step through it. The air between them crackled with energy, the low hum of the archives receding into the background. Her eyes searched his, and he saw a question there. Unspoken but clear. He leaned in, and this time the kiss was not born of desperation or survival, but of shared vulnerability, growing affection, and a connection forged in fire and light, an ancient stone. Her lips were soft, parting slightly beneath his, and he felt her internal light bloom, warm and radiant, responding to his touch. It was a kiss that sealed their bond, not just in ritual, but in feeling. A quiet promise exchanged in the heart of the silent ancient archives. The future was still uncertain, the political challenges real, the cultural divide vast. But in that moment, bonded by ritual, trauma, and a love as improbable as their union, nothing else mattered. They were Elias and Kaelin, human and Vithar, bound together in a way no one could have predicted, finding light and connection in the deepest darkness. Their story, their impossible love, was just beginning.